I'm Renee Williams.
And I'm Billy Thomas.
And welcome to another edition of From the Woods Today. Well, welcome to 2023. We greatly appreciate you joining us.
I know. Can you believe it, Renee? We've made it to 2023 and we're going to roll this thing over and we're going to come at you all year with a whole bunch of great episodes of From the Woods Today. Thank you all so much for being with us. Hope everyone had great holidays and ready for the new year. And I know I'm excited to be here, Renee, as well.
Yeah. You know, we did almost 50 shows last year. And that is a whole lot of content and a lot of ground that we covered. And we greatly appreciate everybody joining us. And, you know, this year we're starting out strong yet again.
Yeah, no doubt. You know, if you happen to miss any of those episodes, please go back fromthewoodstoday.com and you can check out any of those episodes. But a lot of great content. And like you said, a big thanks to all of our guests. You know, we had a lot of our team members that were presenters, but we also had a lot of external guests as well. So that always brings a little excitement to the show. So, but we're glad you're here with us. We really appreciate you all.
Definitely. So you know what? Let's go ahead and get started with our 2023 schedule. So what's on tap for today?
For today, we've got Megan Bulin, and we all know Megan. She is a PhD student here. She's part of our extension crew, and she is an expert when it comes to mushrooms. And she's going to be talking about mushroom cultivation. We're so glad to have Megan talking about that. And we also have Laurie Thomas going to be talking about National Bird Day, which is occurring tomorrow. So we'll find out all about that. And then we're going to wrap up. If you still got your Christmas tree up, if you happen to get a natural Christmas tree, which I'm hoping you did, then I'm hoping you'll be able to learn from Dr. Matt Springer about what you could do with that tree after the holidays. So we're going to be talking about how to recycle that tree after the holidays to help our wildlife and our fisheries out there. So I'm really excited about these guests and today's show, and glad to be with you all as well.
Definitely. So make sure that if you have any questions, you type them in the chat pod and we're going to get started. So Megan, if you want to turn on your camera. Hi, good morning.
Greetings.
How are you all doing today?
Fine. I'm really interested in this cultivating mushroom segment that you have coming on.
Oh yeah, you know, cultivating mushrooms is so much fun. You know, it might seem like something that's a little daunting at first if you've never considered it before, but it's actually really straightforward. For some of the mushrooms that people enjoy the most, it can be really easy to cultivate them yourself at home if that's something that you might be interested in. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, is like the basics of how you might want to go about cultivating some of these easy to grow species right in your own backyard.
I bet you make some converts today.
I hope so. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started here. And if you have questions at any time, like Renee and Billy said, please just drop them in the chat. And we are going to get going and talk about mushroom cultivation. Can you all see this okay?
Yes.
All right, great. Thank you, Billy. Okay, so mushroom cultivation, it might seem kind of scary, but it's super easy and straightforward. And you can see a lot of the pictures in here are going to be pictures that I took. Some of them are not, but like this picture here on the front page, these are mushrooms that I grow in my own backyard with my wonderful assistant here. So it's a very easy process. But to understand mushroom cultivation, one of the first things that you need to understand is like, what is a mushroom? Because if you want to know how to grow something, you have to understand how it works, what it is, and how it interacts with the environment. So, you know, what exactly is a mushroom? Is it a plant? Is it like growing, you know, tomatoes? It's not. It's a very different kind of organism, and it needs different things to grow and to thrive and survive. So mushrooms are a member of the kingdom fungi. And kingdom means that they are their own phylogenetic biological group, very separate from other organisms. We have a kingdom for animals, a kingdom for plants, kingdoms for all kinds of little microbial stuff that we don't usually see, but we also have a kingdom for fungi. And they are very separate from plants. They're not like plants at all, although at one point early botanists and taxonomists did think that mushrooms were types of plants, and you'll see that referenced in very old botanical or taxonomic textbooks. But they're not. They're their own kingdom doing their own thing, and they have their own unique requirements. A fun fact is that even though we are all very distantly related, the kingdom fungi is more closely related to the kingdom Animalia, where humans are located, than they are to plants. So you actually have more in common with the mushrooms on your pizza than you do with the tomatoes. But in all honesty, you don't have much in common with either one. So like mushrooms, they are decomposers. They feed on material. They don't make their own food like plants do. They require a food source. They can't make their own. And when you think about mushrooms, probably one of the easiest ways to think about this is to think of a fungus as being like an apple tree. When we say fungus, we mean the body of the organism, the true organism itself, which for fungi exists as this white filamentous stuff called hyphae. And hyphae is the actual body of the fungal organism, the living, thriving part of the organism that feeds and takes up nutrients and helps the organism grow. And so you can think about it as being like an apple tree. Whereas the mushroom, the part of the fungus that we actually see, you can think of as being an analogy to the apple fruit itself. It's the part of the organism that that organism uses to spread and propagate itself and make more apple trees or mushrooms, whatever the case might be. So you can think of a mushroom as being analogous to a sort of fruit or vegetable. It's the reproductive structure of that organism. And then the spores that mushrooms spread around are like the seeds from your apple trees. They are how that reproductive material, that genetic material is spread to create more mushrooms someplace else. And this is important baseline information to have when you start thinking about mushroom cultivation, because if you want to cultivate mushrooms successfully at home, you need to understand a little bit about what they're doing in the environment, how they're living and what they need. So think about mushrooms as being nature's cleaning crew. The majority of macro fungi, meaning fungi that we can see, because there are thousands and thousands of species of fungi out there that we cannot see, that are microscopic, right? But the macro fungi, the ones that we can see, they are mostly something called saprophytes. And saprophytes mean that they feed on dead and decaying material. So you can think of them as nature's cleaning crew, the garbage men of the natural world. They're out there cleaning up the messes, breaking everything down as they search for food and consuming nutrients from what they're decomposing. And that is how they grow and thrive. And a very important part of what they're doing from an ecological sense in the environment, breaking down that organic matter. And this is important when you think about the food source for your mushrooms. They're mostly saprophytes, the mushrooms that we cultivate and grow. They're saprophytic fungi that feed on this dead and decaying material. So you want to be sure to give them the right kind of food source, which we'll talk about more here in just a moment. So when you think about fungal cultivation, keep in mind these saprophytes are some of the easiest mushrooms to cultivate. There are several species of fungi out there that people very much would like to cultivate. You know, morels, truffles, and chanterelles are three that come immediately to mind. Fungi called mycorrhizal fungi, and they are far more challenging to cultivate and not beginner friendly or really even home cultivation friendly, although truffle cultivation is coming further and further every year. But mycorrhizal fungi, they exist in a symbiotic relationship with a plant species. So they're not saprophytes. They don't feed on that dead and decaying matter. They need a relationship with a living plant host in order to survive and thrive and grow. And that makes them much more challenging and tricky to cultivate, because you're not just dealing with a mushroom or a fungus at that point. You're dealing with that symbiotic relationship between these two organisms, which is much trickier. But the majority of mushrooms that beginning cultivation enthusiasts are interested in growing are these saprophytic fungi, which are far easier to deal with. Mycorrhizal fungi, like we were talking about, they rely on this plant symbiont, and these fungi are recruited by different plants. And there's a lot of tricky components to the ecology and biology between the interaction of those species that makes them very challenging to grow and to cultivate in a controlled setting. Saprophytes, meanwhile, are much easier. They feed on dead and decaying matter, logs, stumps, straw, and they have a lot of flexibility generally in the food that they'll eat. They're not super picky eaters. They're kind of more like the kid that'll eat everything instead of the one who doesn't want to eat any of their veggies. So a little bit of background really quick on mushroom cultivation in the US. This is not a new thing by any means. People have been cultivating mushrooms for thousands of years in Asia, in Europe, and across the globe. People have cultivated mushrooms for a very long time. However, in the US, the first large-scale mushroom cultivation enterprise took place in Pennsylvania. And this is where people employed the natural cave system in the area to provide environmental or temperature regulation to grow these mushrooms. You know, mushrooms love humidity and moisture and cooler temperatures, and this cave systems in Pennsylvania provided that for them. These are the little button mushrooms like you get in the grocery store. And today in the US, Pennsylvania is still the largest producer of these button mushrooms, although they don't grow them in caves anymore. They have more climate controlled conditions. But these button mushrooms were the first large-scale mushroom cultivation enterprise here in the US through this cave system where they would grow them on manure and soil casings. All right, so getting into, you know, like what we really want to talk about here today, which is I want to grow mushrooms at home. How do I do it? There are 4 very important considerations, primary considerations when you want to grow fungi. And we're going to cover all of those today. And the first one that you want to think about is the substrate. The substrate means the substance that you're going to be growing your mushrooms on, the food source for those mushrooms. So most of the mushrooms that we're interested in culturing are going to be saprophytes, feeding on that dead and decaying matter. And that means that they are usually more flexible in their food source. These are just a few examples of some of the substrates that people will commonly use to grow some of these mushroom species. Hardwood pellets are a good choice. And some people will use these hardwood sawdust pellets like you would use for a pellet stove to grow mushrooms. And this can be great. There are some cautions here. You don't want to use any kind of pellets that have coniferous species in them. So no pines, no other species like that, only hardwood trees. And you want to be sure that it's purely hardwood, nothing like broken down pallets or other refuse wood material in there that could have been treated with chemicals at some point or have other crummy stuff going on with it, because ultimately you're hoping to eat these mushrooms. So you don't want their food source to have a lot of toxins or other harsh chemicals in that food source that you might later inadvertently consume. So yeah, pellets and sawdust, hardwood sawdust are a great choice for mushroom cultivation. And part of what makes the pellets a great choice is that they don't have any moisture, very little moisture in them. They're hard pelletized. They don't tend to have a lot of contaminants, other bacteria and fungi in them that might compete with the mushrooms that you're trying to grow for available real estate in that substrate. Logs are also very popular. This isn't as accessible to people who might live in urban areas or people with space restrictions, but especially for shiitake and oyster mushroom cultivation, and we'll talk about both of those specifically later on, log cultivation is a very popular option for people who have access to a woodlot and access to their own logs. So a very long time of growing these mushroom species on logs, a long history of that for some of these species. Straw is also a great choice. And this is actually what I use the most often in my home cultivation, is I just use plain old straw, not hay, it's too much nutrients in hay, but just plain old straw. It's easy to pasteurize or sterilize, which we'll talk about in just a minute. And it's a really nice food source, especially for oyster mushrooms. This is a great starting material when you get into growing your own mushrooms at home. People will also use other kind of odd materials. People use coffee beans for growing a couple kinds of oyster mushrooms. They'll use the ground coffee, the coffee grounds after it's been used to make coffee itself, the leftover waste grounds. Instead of throwing them in the compost pile or the trash, you can use them to grow oyster mushrooms. Now, full disclaimer, I've tried this numerous occasions because I love coffee and I love mushrooms, and this would be the coolest thing ever. But all I grow is green mold. So there's some trick. It's a little bit trickier as far as home cultivation goes to get this one to work, but I do know people who have done it successfully, and it would certainly be a great way to grow mushrooms if you could get it to work. Casings or a mixture of manure, sawdust, and soil is very popular for some species like these button mushrooms to grow on. This isn't so much accessible to home cultivators, but a lot of small commercial cultivators will use this method for some of the mushrooms that they like to grow. And also cocoa coir, corn cobs, and get creative. There's all kinds of other waste materials that people can sometimes use for cultivating mushrooms. Just keep in mind that if you decide to experiment with some of these materials, there is a pretty high chance of failure as you try to figure it out. So just go into it with an open mind and don't expect it to work right away, but think of it as part of that exploratory process of learning how to utilize what you have to grow these fungi. You also want to think about pasteurization or sterilization of your substrate. Once you have that substrate, whatever it might be, straw, sawdust, pellets, you need to pasteurize or sterilize it to make it a more friendly habitat for your mushrooms, because there's all kinds of other microbes that can be in that substrate, bacteria and other fungi that are going to compete with your mushrooms for the available real estate of that substrate. So you want to pasteurize or sterilize it in some way to knock back some of those competitors and give your mushrooms the best possible start. I use cold pasteurization. This is another word for a type of pH change, pasteurization that people will utilize. And this is the exact product that I use. It's this hydrated lime that you can buy at some garden centers. And what it does is it significantly raises the pH of the substrate. It makes it more alkaline. And it helps shock those bacteria and fungi and kill off a lot of those competitors. So what I usually do at home is I take a big clean trash can that I only use for mushroom cultivation and doesn't ever have trash in it, and stuff it full of straw, measure a certain amount of this hydrated lime on top, and add water, and I'll soak the whole thing overnight. You want to be careful with this in the summer because the temperatures are so high, you can start to get some funky stuff going on. But most of the time, just soaking it overnight will allow that pH to rise, kill off some of those competitors, and the next day you can drain off that excess water and use that substrate for pasteurizing or for growing your mushrooms. This works best with straw. It's very easy with straw. For other substrates like sawdust, this could be much more challenging because, you know, sawdust and water and it's going to float everywhere. But this is a really easy passive option for sterilizing your substrate for home cultivation, especially if you're using straw as a beginner option. This is really the best way to go about it. Filling this big tub, adding that pH, that hydrated lime, and letting that shock occur to the substrate is really straightforward and an easy thing for most people to do at home. The other primary way that people pasteurize substrate is through heat pasteurization. And this can be done with the method shown here. You have a really large drum and some kind of a heating system hooked up to that drum, and you'll essentially boil the material. And this is a great method to use if you want to mess with setting up a system like this, or you even have the ability to set up a system like this. It's a little bit more finicky than what I really am working with right now, but people who are dealing with large volumes of substrate will sometimes use this method. You can also look at using a pressure cooker for heat pasteurization, and I have done this. It's pretty straightforward as long as you are familiar with pressure cooker safety. Using those pellets or sawdust, this is the best way to use a pressure cooker, is to have something like that, like pellets or sawdust in a container, either an open mason jar or these special plastic bags that are specifically designed to go in a pressure cooker for mushroom cultivation. And you can sterilize the substrate that way using a pressure cooker. That's also an option. Just be sure to be careful when using this piece of machinery. You also want to think about the fungal culture that you're going to be using. This is the substance that you're going to buy from a reputable mushroom grower or source that you are going to use to grow your mushrooms at home. Some of the most popular options are grain spawn that you can buy from mushroom growers that will be inoculated with the hyphae, the material of that mushroom, so you can grow it at home. Grain spawn is really popular for some fungi. Sawdust spawn, especially for oyster mushrooms and shiitake mushrooms, is very commonly utilized. And you can see that white dusty coating all over it. That's the hyphae, that's the fungal body that is going to be inoculated into your substrate so that it can grow on your substrate and make mushrooms for you. Dowels, wooden dowels, are very, very popular for shiitake cultivation. This is where they're being hammered into those logs. These little wooden dowels are a very easy method for that kind of cultivation, especially on a large scale. You can have a log drilled with all the holes for dowels and just hammer them in and have someone coming behind covering them up with canning wax to seal them off from the environment. It's a very straightforward method, especially for rapid large-scale cultivation. Some professional mushroom growers, people who are doing this for commercial uses, will use liquid cultures or pure cultures. but beware of this for small scale home cultivation. When you see people online trying to sell you things like pure cultures or liquid cultures, that should be a little bit of an alarm bell going off. A lot of reputable sources will do this as well, but they market them sort of specifically for large scale commercial cultivators. When you see people trying to sell stuff like this for home cultivation, you might want to approach it with just a little bit of caution, because sometimes you can't be too sure what you're actually getting. Receptacles. What are you going to put this substrate and this fungal culture in so you can grow your awesome mushrooms? Well, I love buckets. 5-gallon buckets from Lowe's or Home Depot. These are food grade buckets that I drill holes in with a little power drill and stuff them full of that straw that has been cold pasteurized and is full of that fungal culture to grow awesome oyster mushrooms. They'll grow right out of the holes in the bucket. It's super easy, straightforward, and I keep stacks of buckets under my porch to grow mushrooms in. It's very easy and very user-friendly. In between grow cycles, once these mushrooms have quit growing, I'll just pull all the old straw out, scrub it out with a very light bleach solution, and it's ready to go for the next time that I want to use it. So for me, it's also very environmentally friendly because I'm not worried about putting a bunch of plastic or other materials into the trash system instead of something that I can reuse like this bucket. But logs are also a really great option. You know, this is a natural material. You don't need to worry about any plastic, any other kind of a receptacle. And this is a great option for shiitake and oyster mushroom cultivation, or for some other species that we won't talk about specifically here today, but things like Hericium or hen or chicken of the woods grow really well on log systems like this. But again, this is more for larger scale cultivation or people who have access to their own woodlot. You can use buckets to grow them, like we talked about, really easy and straightforward. People use jars. This is very popular in some parts of Asia as a way to grow different species of fungi in commercial and home cultivation. These are little enoki mushrooms, Flammulina velotypes, that are grown in the dark. That's why they're white like this. And they're grown in mass for large scale cultivation in some parts of Asia using these jars that are stuffed full of substrate. Grow bags are popular for commercial cultivators. You can see why. This is a large volume of substrate in a bag that's hanging up kind of like a boxing bag. It's maximizing space and is possibly a kind of small temperature controlled grow room to allow commercial cultivators to grow as many fungi as possible in as small a space as they possibly can. So this is a popular option for people who are kind of scaling up their cultivation. Blocks are also really popular, both for home cultivation and for commercial cultivation. And if you're getting into mushrooms for the first time and you might want to start growing your own, but you feel a little nervous to go through the whole process right off, you can buy pre-inoculated blocks from reputable sources that are ready to go. And these are already inoculated. All you have to do is set them out on your counter, follow some very easy instructions, and these will grow mushrooms for you. And I really recommend this for people who have never grown mushrooms before, but are curious and learning more about the process. This is a really user-friendly way to experience mushroom cultivation for the first time without all the worry of contamination or other things going wrong. And you can also get really creative. I've seen mushrooms grown in some really unique containers, old coffee cans, old 2-liter soda containers are a great option. I did this with some high school students last year. They didn't have a lot of space, so we used these old 2-liter containers, stuffed them full of substrate and oyster mushroom spawn, and used that to grow some really beautiful pink oyster mushrooms that the class just had a great time viewing that growing process and watching that hyphae colonize the substrate. So this is a great option for small classroom projects, or just if you want to play with this on a very small scale. Waste baskets have been utilized, old rubber containers. There's all kinds of containers that you can utilize for growing these mushrooms. If you can get a little bit creative about it, there's no end to what you can try. I've seen old onion bags, all kinds of stuff. And then location. Location is always important, right? And this is largely a consideration of how much space is available to you. Do you have outdoor acreage? Do you have a woodlot? If so, log cultivation is a great option. But this isn't so friendly for people living in town or in smaller areas. Garden beds are a great method for cultivation of some species that grow on wood chips like Stripharia, which we'll talk about in a minute. Very user-friendly, beginner-friendly species. And this is one that we grow with some local garden groups downtown and youth groups where we seed the mulch around their fruit trees with Stripharia. And they got these awesome Stripharia mushrooms that grew out of the mulch right around their fruit trees in a very small space. They had a lot of fun with it, and it was cool to see. Buckets are great for patio or small spaces. You can stack them so you're maximizing the space that you have available to you. This is what I do. Buckets stacked 2 or 3 high to grow a good volume of oyster mushrooms in a very small grad student friendly space. Low tunnels are popular for some species. This is a little bit more of that temperature control, environmental control without being completely environmentally regulated. So still rather passive, but it provides you with a little bit of shelter from the beating sun. And this is popular for log cultivation and for cultivation of some other species. People use old storage sheds, old shipping containers. There's really no end to the kind of creativity you can see in mushroom cultivation. But this is one of the most popular options for new small scale growers, is a little grow room like this that you can sanitize, hose down the walls and ceilings and clean really easily to grow mushrooms in an environmentally controlled condition. You also want to keep in mind temperature considerations. Mostly what I grow personally are oyster mushrooms, except for also Stripharia. But with the oyster mushrooms, this changes for me with the seasons. I grow different strains, different varieties of oyster mushroom in the summer when the temperatures are really high than I do in the fall and winter when it's much colder. And so there are several reputable growers in the US of mushrooms who can provide you with chart information like this on the different strains of mushrooms that you might want to grow at different times of the year. And this is largely dependent upon fruiting temperature, that temperature range at which the mushroom is going to fruit the best. And reputable growers will have this information well documented and easily available to you if you are curious, to help you choose the right mushroom at the right time. And this information is available for both shiitakes and oysters from several different growers. So a little bit about cultivation of 3 of the most popular species. Oyster mushrooms are the species that by far I recommend for beginner new cultivators. They're easy and versatile. They are tolerant of a wide range of conditions and they're pretty hardy. It takes a lot to kill an oyster mushroom. So they can stand up to contaminants, they can outcompete some of those other microbes, and they really are pretty happy with most conditions as long as you give them a ready food source and you keep them out of the blazing sun, they should do all right. There's a diversity of strains available, like we talked about, and a fairly low risk for failure. They're a great option for people who are just starting out, and they taste delicious, which is always a plus. Excuse me. There's also Stripharia, or wine cap mushrooms, is also what you might hear them called. This is another beginner-friendly species. They grow really well on wood chips, on straw, and all you need to do is take the substrate that you'll buy from a reputable source and seed or inoculate that substrate with that spawn in the fall or in the early spring. And the following fall or spring, so if you inoculate this coming spring, you wouldn't expect mushrooms until the following fall, but you should see a fruiting, a flush of those Stripharia mushrooms. Now you can't go and spread this on mulch that's been sitting out in your yard for a year or more because there's already all kinds of other stuff living there. But if you've just put down, I'm so sorry. If you've just put down fresh mulch that is not dyed, isn't chemically treated, this is a great option for Stripharia cultivation. And finally, shiitake mushrooms. This is the second most commonly cultivated mushroom in North America. They're often cultivated on logs or on sawdust blocks and being spring or winter fruiters. They're not quite as beginner friendly as Stripharia or oyster mushrooms, but if you have the space for log cultivation, there's a fairly low risk of failure with this species. They do a bit more poorly on sawdust blocks. It's a little bit more difficult to get them going, and sometimes all you get is green mold. But on logs, if you have the space, this is a very beginner friendly option. All right, that's all that we have today on mushroom cultivation. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them. And please, reach out if you have any questions.
thanks, Megan. We greatly appreciate that. Yeah, I loved your presentation. That was great. And we do have a lot of questions that are coming in. And so one was, how do you plant in a bucket? What is the ratio of lime to straw before soaking?
What is the ratio of the lime to straw? There's a formula out there. At this point, I'll be honest, Renee, I kind of eyeball it because I've been doing it for quite a while.
Right. So a
But
5-gallon bucket, it's like
this is like a 25 or 30 gallon
okay.
trash can. So it's a big trash can, and I do somewhere around a cup of lime for every 10 gallons of water. So since I know how big the trash can is, I don't measure anything. It's just putting in 2.5 to 3 cups of lime, throwing in the straw in the water, and just letting it soak overnight that way. Sorry, everyone's had this crud going around.
No, that's okay. You still were getting this
fighting it.
great content. Yeah. Sure.
So are there any particular log species?
Hardwood logs are going to be best. You don't want to use conifer species. There's all kinds of pitfalls to using conifers, and that is just something that I would encourage people to avoid completely, is don't use conifers. Hardwoods are great. Oak is always a good option, beech, maple. A lot of the hardwoods that we have around here are actually great options for mushroom cultivation, but those are some of the top species. Oak, maple, and beech are always good options for almost any of the mushrooms you'd want to cultivate with logs.
And Megan, I was going to say, if you're a woodland owner, you may have a ready supply of these, and you can actually do that in a way that improves the rest of the woods, right? So you can use that, basically salvage some of that material that you take out, use it for mushroom cultivation. At the same time, you're enhancing your woodland. So working with a professional forester, they can help you navigate that for sure.
Absolutely. And there, Billy, there are several people here in the state of Kentucky who commercially cultivate shiitake, and they're also woodland owners, and they do exactly what you were describing. They acquire logs and the process of managing their woodland correctly, and have a win-win for the woodland and for mushroom growing.
Right. Yeah. So take advantage of it, woodland owners. Plus,
Absolutely.
they're yummy.
So
also, what company do you recommend for King Stropharia? Is that how you
Oh, for the Stropharia. I use them all the time, and right now it just slipped my mind, Renee.
you can put it in the chat.
I'll drop it in the chat.
Yeah. Okay. Wonderful.
Yeah, I will definitely drop that in the chat. I buy from them every couple of months, and when you're on the spot, then it's just gone.
Exactly. Yes, some say that they use Field and Forest products.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. That's
yeah,
it.
DJ Scully.
Okay, DJ. Yeah, thanks, DJ.
Yeah,
thank you.
Appreciate that.
All right. Wonderful. Well, Megan, that was a load of information, and we greatly appreciate that. Again, her program will be on our website within a week or so, and so you'll be able to watch that if there's anything that you're like, oh, I can't remember what she said.
Renee, I think I'm gonna be watching. I've got to tell my wife we're gonna have to start doing some mushrooms.
I know. I want to do some in the backyard.
Megan, you've inspired us, so thank you so much.
It's really fun and easy, and if people have questions, please feel free to shoot me an email. I'll try to answer them the best that I can. But yeah, Field and Forest is who I recommend, and part of what is great about working with them is that they have a great IT department that can help you troubleshoot the questions that you might have about mushroom cultivation. They're a family business. I really highly recommend them to work with. They're a small business, great company.
Excellent.
So if you wanted to grow in buckets, you could probably ask them what would be the best cultivation to put in there, right? To put the stuff.
Yeah. Oyster mushrooms are the best option for buckets by far. I've experimented with other species and had middling success, but nowhere near the success I have with oyster mushrooms. And almost any species of oyster mushroom that is listed as being substrate friendly is going to be a great option for bucket cultivation, because those will grow well on straw.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
As always, Megan, you came strong with some good content for sure.
Exactly.
Well, thank you all for asking me to be here today.
Yeah,
We appreciate it.
Good way to kick off 23.
Exactly.
Yeah, good deal.
All right. Well, Billy, tomorrow is National Bird Day.
A special day. And we got Laurie here to tell us about this special bird day tomorrow.
Yeah. Happy New Year, everyone. Happy 2023. But yeah, I wanted to quickly share with you. Let me pull up my PowerPoint, share with you a little bit about National Bird Day, which is going to be celebrated tomorrow, January 5th. And it's really that day that is set aside to appreciate birds for their beauty and song and flight that have long been a source to human inspiration. And I, being a birder, I totally understand this because it is, yeah, it's wonderful watching birds and how much I appreciate them. So this National Bird Day hasn't been around that long. It's only been around since 2002, and it comes at the very end of the annual Christmas bird count. So January 5th is the last day of the Christmas bird count. So if there's any birders out there, you all may have participated in that this year, but that runs usually December to the very beginning of January. So this is just a day to think about our birds, think about how we appreciate them and things that we can do for them. So it's National Bird Day is the celebration of all the different bird species that we have. It's estimated there's more than 10,000 different species of birds worldwide. And we know many of those, while we have that many, we know a lot of them are under threat due to climate change and loss of habitat. And this day is a day to think about those things and recognize those and see what we can do to maybe make some differences. Birds are often keystone species in many of our ecosystems, and there can definitely be signifiers of its health and its vitality. So some activities that you could do on National Bird Day: study some birds. Check out, there's tons of great books out there. I just listed just a couple here. Check out a book about birds. If you wanted just to learn and look at, what makes a bird, there's the Sibley Guide to Birds. It's a great bird guide. Then there's a great book, The Genius of Birds. And this is a fantastic read. It is nonfiction. And then there's also a memoir, H is for Hawk. Check those out along with many others that are out there. You could also check out the All About Birds website. If you've not checked it out, absolutely do. It is just a wealth of knowledge about birds. It is put together by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And in addition to learning about birds, say you've seen one in your backyard, you want to know more about it, where does it nest, what does it eat, you can look all of that up, but you can also take online classes. And I've taken several. Many of them are free and they're an hour long or whatever. Some of them you can pay for and they'll be considered almost like a semester long. Lots of content there. So check out All About Birds to study more about birds. You could even watch some birds. And it's estimated that more Americans watch birds than play baseball and American football combined. So this could be your new hobby. If this isn't something you've done before, but you're kind of interested, this is the time to start that. So you could really start this out by downloading the free Merlin Bird app. You can get that, on your phone, and it's for both Android and iPhone. So that's easy to use. It's great in helping you identify birds out in the field. So you're not carrying your big clunky field guide. You can quickly pull your phone out, look something up. It even has an option you hit record and it's recording the sound of the bird as it's singing, and it'll give you a variety of options. Is it this bird? Is it this bird? So a great resource, and it'll be based on where you're located. We're all in the eastern half, so you're going to download that packet there. And then you can put a bird feeder out. I do this every year. I am a Project Feeder watcher, but you can put that bird feeder out and join Project Feeder Watch, which is put out by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology also, and become a part of community science for the birds. And this program does cost, it's about, I think, $18 for non-lab members, but it's a great way to start your bird watching, start learning your birds, those common backyard birds that we have. They kind of sit still a little better than trying to chase them through the woods. You can see them at your feeder, use your binoculars, help identify them, and then you go in and log what you've seen, and you're helping us keep track, helping Cornell and the bird community keep track of the birds and where they're visiting and how that's changing over time throughout the winter. So hopefully you'll have some fun tomorrow. Think about birds, get out, do one of these activities for the National Bird Day. All right, I'll stop share.
Thanks, Lori. That was a fun little segment. I really appreciate you doing
Yeah,
it.
I know. Excellent. Take care.
Appreciate it. Thank you,
Did
Laurie.
you hear that, Billy? They were talking about football, basketball. More, you watch birds, it could be a new hobby for you.
There you go.
Think about it. It is a hobby that anybody can do. You can do it as a youngster. You can do it as we get gray. As long as you're out or you're sitting at your in a chair in your living room watching your bird feeder. So yeah, it's very accessible.
And a great way to connect people to nature, really.
Right. Absolutely.
Thank you, Laurie.
Thank you, Laurie.
Really good stuff.
All right. Well, so if you still have that tree up,
Don't throw it away yet.
don't throw it away.
Yes, Dr. Matt Springer, who is actually at our annual Kentucky Fruit and Vegetable Conference, presenting today, but he did prepare a video for us about what to do with that tree, that Christmas tree, how to recycle it to help wildlife and fisheries. So big thanks to Dr. Springer for putting this together. I know he wishes he could be here with us, but he's teaching other folks out there some great information, probably about how to keep critters out of their gardens.
Probably.
But anyway, again, big thanks to Matt for all that he does for the show. Appreciate that.
Good morning. This is Dr. Matt Springer here today to talk to you about what you can do with your Christmas tree that is wildlife friendly or fisheries friendly now that the holiday season is over. And I'll tell you what, there's several inquiring minds that want to know in the wildlife and fisheries world because many species can benefit based on what you do with your Christmas tree. And hopefully it won't just be put it on the curb and get rid of it. So let's start with some of the options that are out there. And there's several, but it really kind of depends on your situation. There's a couple of questions you can ask. What species may you want to help, whether that's wildlife or fisheries? How much time do you have to work with the Christmas tree? And there's a few things we're going to talk about that are a little more time consuming. There's some that really aren't that time consuming. And then lastly, there's the space as part of this, where if you live in town, maybe you don't have a whole lot of places you can put a Christmas tree outside to help wildlife. But if you're in the country or you have a larger area in your backyard, then there's a couple more places you can put it. So let's jump right into this here. And we're going to start with not really a wildlife fishery side, but an easier option that isn't putting your tree in the curb. And that's, you can reach out to a goat farmer or someone who has a goat or goats that, goats will consume these trees down to nothing. They love them. It's a great food source for them, as many things are for goats, pretty much everything. But it's a simple way that your tree doesn't end up on the curb and gets recycled pretty quickly and turns to compost real quick. And, if you don't know a goat farmer, you might be able to reach out and find one through your county extension agent. They might be able to put you in touch with somebody that would take the tree. However, this is an option that exists and it's one that people talk about. So I want to make sure to mention it. The next option that doesn't really require a lot of time that we're going to go into a little bit of details here and why it's a good thing is actually donating your Christmas tree to Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources. And they have a whole bunch of different drop-off locations, and the program actually has a pretty good description here found at this link. And the only thing that they ask if you're going to donate your tree to them at one of these locations is that you make sure it's free of decorations or lights. Many of these locations are easily accessible. They're usually in parking lots of parks or at boat ramps. Somewhere that you can just pull right up with your vehicle, throw it right into the pile that exists in the designated area, and go ahead and drive off. So it doesn't require a whole lot of effort on your end outside of just getting the tree to that location. And here's an actual list of the locations for this year, broken down by the fisheries district that's going to use them. So if you want to contribute to a certain area that maybe you fish at, you could drive your tree all the way down to that area, find the closest one, and then they're going to use that here in the way I'm going to describe in a second. But this is basically a breakdown of the locations for this year and who you can contact if you have any questions. And this can be found at the website that was linked below. But as you can see, there's a bunch out there, several in our central district here, including Jacobson Park here in Lexington, and also in Scott County at the Scott County Park for the closer ones. But there's several out there. And what they're actually going to use these for is creating structure in the lake in areas that may be lacking structure. And why is structure good? Well, really it provides cover for game fish, for smaller minnows and fingerlings to escape those bigger game fish. And it can attract fish of all kinds, and it depends on where they're placed. Sometimes it's they're in shallower flats and used in terms of cover for spawning, or the fish that have just spawned. Sometimes it's in deeper water where they can access it in winter and to get cover as they're trying to make it through the cooler months. But realistically, all they do is they're tying these together, fashioning them together, and adding weight to them so they don't drift off. These things will last several years in that area. And what they will do then outside of that, the fisheries folks, is they take GPS points of where they drop the trees off so fishermen can get access to where they created these cover to hopefully catch some of those fish that are attracted to it. It's an easy way of helping out fisheries. And also, if you think about it, fish are food for many of our wildlife species, including otters, many of our bird species, our larger raptors, blue herons, and so on. So, it's not directly wildlife friendly, but it works up the food chain to help them out. The next option is to create more of a bird-friendly backyard. So if you have an area that you want to, in your backyard that you have enough space that you can put your Christmas tree out there, you can have a couple different things that you can do, from some that are not very time consuming to something that's more like pictured here that is a little bit more time consuming, but very wildlife friendly. So you can basically put these trees in your backyard, either standing them up. This one actually is more of a live tree that was decorated, but you can stand up your Christmas tree that you have along a fence or against another tree and decorate it here with bird food. You can use cookie cutters. You can make it a fun child friendly activity. I think we're going to hear a little bit more about that later on this show, so I don't want to go into it. But using bird food, fruits, hanging them on with yarn will attract birds and feed them. And also the permanence of those the evergreen that we have here is producing cover from predators with quick access to food. It's pretty hard for a hawk or a cat to get at a bird that's feeding in one of these trees. So it adds both thermal and protective cover for them with food access. And in terms of some of the things that you can do for food, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has this nice handy dandy poster of how you can decorate your Christmas tree. Some of these are pretty simple. Take pine cones, put some peanut butter and oats on them and hang them up in the tree, cutting up orange slices or apple slices, to creating very decorative strings of grapes or popcorn, which take a little bit more time, but add to the fun of it all. So this can be as time consuming and decorative as you want, but there are a lot of options that are out there. In addition, you can take a route of just putting a sunflower head that has seeds on it in there. That's a pretty simple, especially if you've grown sunflowers in your garden. Many species of birds will be all over the food that you're providing them there. Another simpler option instead of decorating them is you can literally just take that tree and lay it on its side near maybe where you have existing bird feeders, or in areas that are lacking cover. You can pile up more brush around it or add it as a base to create a bigger wildlife habitat there. And think more of creating cover, escape cover for many species. Obviously, the birds are going to use it, but other things like rabbits and squirrels, mice, other small mammals, they're going to use that to escape predators and also act as ground cover and thermal cover from extreme weather events like snowstorm, rain. It's going to add a little more shelter for it. So that's a simple way of using it to provide wildlife cover. You can go that more advanced and decorate it and enjoy a lot more activity probably. However, just taking it, putting it out there in an area will provide wildlife benefit. Keep in mind that many of these species also break down pretty quickly, so that's going to create soil and break down and improve that area over time. So you can use it like a compost pile, or think of it as a compost pile if you want. There's a few more interesting options out there. The National Christmas Tree Foundation has a how to recycle webpage. Arbor Day also has one if you Google it. And there's that website for Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources. Again, you can also just go on their main page and do Christmas tree in their search engine, and it pops right up in the options.
Well, thank you very much, Matt. We greatly appreciate that. And he was talking about a show that we did before that you could make. We had all these, you could do this, all these different wildlife treats. And it was really interesting, everything from pine cones to bird cookies to, it was really interesting, all the different things you could do, whether, you just want to do them or you wanted to do it with your family or your children or what have you. It was really interesting, some stuff that you can create just out of stuff in your backyard.
Very cool. Yes, I really appreciate Matt and all of our presenters today. Good show.
Yeah. We greatly appreciate you joining us today, with our first show of 2023. We look forward to you joining us every week. We definitely have a lot of things on outlook for you all, and, everything from woodland topics to you name it, we've got it. So,
Yeah. Yeah, we want to help you along this journey, right? You all are here because you have an interest or you care about the woods and wildlife and natural resources here in Kentucky, as do we. So we want to be partners with you along this journey. So let us help you however we can by letting us know what you need to know, right? And we'll try to track it down and share that information with you.
yeah, because you can always go to fromthewoodstoday.com, and there's a little survey link on there, and you can click on it, and there is a comment section where you can let us know there's something in your woods that you're like, I don't know what this is. You can actually send us a picture, and we'll try to get that, and we may even feature it on the show. We've been known to do that, so
No doubt. No doubt.
we greatly appreciate anything that you could send us.
Yep. So please share the word, let others know about this show and some of the resources available, because believe it or not, folks, there's a tremendous amount of support out there for those who care about their woodlands or own their woodlands. And we'd like to connect those people with the appropriate folks.
Definitely. But, we are done for today. Until then, take care and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
From the woods today.